What's going on, guys? This is Skyhound, also known as Geek Detective Pierce. So, when I first saw this trailer, I was pretty intrigued because this was not exactly one of your typical takes on, grim fairy tales and the like. But what was really interesting is the fact that this was from a book in Japan, and I forgot the exact title in Japanese, but basically the gist is Red Riding Hood is a bit of a detective, kind of like Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot. For those of you who have watched a few of the specials they had on Amazon Prime. Basically, this is regarding Cinderella. It does an interesting twist on it in terms of the story. I will try my best not to get into spoiler territory, but if you've seen the trailer, it is basically the gist of this is mostly Cinderella goes to the ball, but Red Riding Hood, she comes across her, and basically there is a murder that happens, and on the way to the ball they accidentally hit a body, but Detective Riding Hood finds out that the person's already dead, and by the time they get to the ball, the thing with this country is that they over obsess with beauty, and when he gets to that little tidbit about physical beauty and appearances and all that, I do want to point out that the relationship between father and son sounds a bit rocky at best. And, the king tells his son, this is the reason why I threw this ball for you, is I told you I'd find someone who is, beautiful for you to be your princess. And the son kind of rebels at him and saying, Father, I get what you're trying to do for me, but you really don't understand me here. You never took my feelings into consideration. You keep going on about how things would look for you and just disregard me there. However, the one thing that really caught my attention was that the hairdresser Hans, who was the one that was killed, basically has a really odd, I wouldn't say fetish, but it was more of like he has this creepy collection of hair, long hair that was cut. And on the logic side, there's just something that just screams, I would say stalker for the most part, because he keeps complaining on about, hair made like this, is like, done in a way that I can't, is just, to him, he's just basically jealous. I'll put it that way. But the reasoning behind it just seems a bit, I don't know if I would say standoffish, but mentally this guy is not stable. Yes, he's a royal hairdresser for the king, but the fact that one of the victims is actually the love interest of the prince, and then we see the sister of one of the sisters of Cinderella like overhearing this argument, I'm just like, oh boy, this is going to get ugly fast. And the king kind of finds out that his son was being blackmailed by the hairdresser. And I was like, oh, this is going to get ugly. Because it's not just the hairdresser that also has secrets. You know, the son also has his own secrets. And it wasn't just, you know, the servant girl that he likes. But in retaliation to his father, he tosses the crown into a trash bin or something close to that. He just simply tosses it in the trash. And his dad is pissed at him. And it takes, you know, Detective Riding Hood to accompany Cinderella to the ball to basically get down to this mystery. And she was able to piece together, like, you know, what was going on, how it happened, slowly, I might add. But the one thing that really caught my attention, there's quite a few things that caught my attention, sorry, not just one thing. But one of the things that really got interesting is when you see her reaction. You can sort of see it on here. The one in the middle that I'm looking at right now. That expression she makes when something she knows is amiss. And she's mentally putting the whole thing together. And she's like, okay, something's totally... There's something here that doesn't belong here, to put it simply. What she discovers is that basically there's a couple of witches who are only good at making certain things. The older witch, I forgot her name already, but she's only good at doing clothes, but not shoes. The younger one, actually, her name, I remember her name now, thank goodness. It's Tekla, Tekla. She's good at turning shoes into glass slippers. And that's one of the things that Red Riding Hood notices during the ball. And the fact that she went there and, you know, she also has glass slippers, she's able to realize that, okay, there's something here that basically is connected to, you know, what's been going on as of late. Because when she first comes across Cinderella, yeah, she's in rags and like all of that stuff. And then she inquires, you know, okay, how exactly did you get these cuts on your feet? And the simple answer she gives was, you know, one of my sisters likes raspberries and jam. And so I went out to get it, though, and that's how I got these cuts. I won't go any further than that. But basically, as time winds down, the magic starts to wear off. And then both Cinderella and Red Riding Hood kind of like, you know, split up. Because basically the king and his men and his guards are trying to find them. And he knows, and they know something's off. So basically, it comes to a point where Detective Riding Hood finds the other sister. She tells the story in terms of, you know, what happened to Hans. And despite getting caught by the guards, she knows that the advisor to the king, that he tries to help the king the best he can, but she knows logically that his conclusions are a bit off. And so they go to Hans's house, and that is when she finds a few critical pieces of information. One of them has to do with blood that's been on that house for a year. And one of the other things that she found prior to going to the house was a piece of a heel from a glass slipper. And she's going, okay, wait a second. This is really useful. If my conclusions actually, follow straight to the letter here, this likely falls into the same slipper that I just found, Cinderella wearing. But is she actually the killer? And during the ball, I'm going to bounce back here. She's interviewing, a few individuals, including the king to a degree. And the king is trying to understand, why weren't you over at, your dance practice or, other stuff? He's like, why weren't you around when I came to check on you? And the prince's alibi was, I went for a walk at a certain time. What he didn't realize is that he was actually being watched over on the hill. And it is at this point that after the prince is, taken away for a bit, that we see somebody come inside the ballroom and addresses, the congregation, your information is off. And then Detective Riding Hood, after she listens to her explanation, is able to piece certain bits of this mystery together. That's just part one of it. And then, as I mentioned later on, she comes across one of the sisters and gets some critical pieces of information. So that's, I would say, section 2 of the mystery. Then later on it gets to section 3, which has to do with, what Hans was doing, how it was done. And then the big critical piece that she found earlier, the piece of the heel from the glass slipper, she's like, okay, I definitely know who the killer is. Which I will not reveal, but for those of you who are curious, if you've been slowly paying attention as to who, to the dialogue, I guess I would say, and, how it's being presented, I think you'll find that the reason behind it is a lot more clearer if you take the time to observe what's going on. For the most part, I would say, even though it looks predictable, in my opinion, I think it's not. But overall, I think the attempt that they're trying to do with this mystery story in a fantasy setting is actually a pretty good attempt, while trying to keep certain aspects of the grim fairy tale, I guess I would say true to the source for the most part. Like, certain elements are there, but again, Japan, did this on, based off an actual novel that was written in Japan, and then they adapted it into this. So visually, overall, I would say it's definitely a 10 out of 10. Story-wise, this is where I think some people are going to come to gripes with. At best, maybe 7 out of 10. Characterization, at best, in my opinion, I'm going to give it an 8. Because, each of them had their role to play. Some I think did better than others. But again, depends on how you look at it. Overall, on this film, I'm going to give it at least an 8 out of 10. But yeah, this is just my thoughts on Once Upon a Crime based on a Japanese novel. You know, Red Riding Hood being a detective and all that. I think that was actually pretty good. But yeah, that's just my general thoughts. This is Skyhound, also known as Geek Detective Pierce, signing off for now. Take care. Peace.